This interview is part of the James J. Blanchard Living Library of Michigan Political History. Peter B. Fletcher, it's a great pleasure to interview you for the Michigan Political History Society. I think you've described two different kinds of people who get involved in politics and government. What are those two categories?
Well, it's an oversimplification. I am certainly eager to confess to that. But generally speaking, there are people who want to seek and occupy public office. And they want to do this for a variety of reasons, some noble, some not so noble. Then there are those of us, I think more like myself, who want to help the right people get elected to the proper offices and then discharge those responsibilities in a very honest and forthright manner. And I have worked on many campaigns over the years. I have thoroughly enjoyed that. But because of my involvement in politics, I was rather dragged, rather reluctantly, into occupying 4 different constitutional offices of the state of Michigan. And then I was elected to one local office on a city charter commission. And all of these were very interesting experiences. And I think I learned a lot about human nature, which is, of course, the key to success. Understanding human nature, because it is the only unchanging thing in this universe. Study the Greek philosophers, the Roman philosophers, the German philosophers, English philosophers, French philosophers, all of them have a constant theme. Human nature is so predictable. Political science is not an oxymoron. Just understand politics, and the way you do is understand human nature.
Okay, so was the Charter Commission the only office you were ever elected to?
Yes.
For the city of Ypsilanti?
Yes, yes.
Now, was that before you got involved?
No, that was after I had been involved in the state politics.
Okay, so you started out involving yourself in local elections,
yes,
like
city council,
school boards,
that's
stuff
right,
like
that's
that.
Right, exactly.
Then what? You got involved with Governor Romney. We won't talk
Here's
about
what
Governor
happened.
Romney
well,
necessarily.
Here's
go
what
ahead.
happened originally. A very good friend of mine, J. Don Lawrence, a very prominent local attorney, was interested in running for the Constitutional Convention that we had in 1960. The election was in 64, right. I believe, around in there. And he wanted to run for delegate. He'd run for nothing else before, came to me, I managed his campaign, and we won very handily. So he goes to the Constitutional Convention. There's where we meet George Romney for the first time. We had known about him, understood his interest, and George Romney had been very successful in getting Michigan to amend its constitution so we could then finally have a state constitutional convention. Romney was elected, was one of the vice chairs, Steve Nesbitt, a wonderful choice for being chairman of it. And J. Don Lawrence was our delegate from Ypsilanti. So I would attend sessions. That's where I met President Eisenhower and President Truman, because they both spoke. Really? And I got to meet them because J. Don took me down on the convention floor. Right. And that's where I first met George Romney, and very impressive character. And so when he decided to run for governor, I signed on to his campaign strictly as a volunteer, and was recruited to some degree by Bob Teeter, who was very active in Republican politics back then.
A pollster.
Yes, very prominent.
Albion College professor.
Right. Very, very prominent. And we worked together very nicely, and we got George Romney elected governor.
1962.
That's right, and it worked out very well. And then from then on, I was involved in the Romney campaigns, each succeeding campaign. Then when he departed for Washington to be part of the Nixon administration as the Secretary of HUD, Bill Milliken becomes governor. But I had also worked with Governor Milliken when he was running for lieutenant governor. I was very active in that campaign. But once he becomes governor, I'm even more involved, because he needed some very quick additions to his his kitchen cabinet.
That was like 1969.
Right. Yep. And he was immediatand faced with election in 1970.
Right.
And that was a very tough election, and he won by a very slim margin. But and by the way, the state constitution had been involved. The new constitution was involved, had been adopted by a very slim margin, and we always claimed that Washington County provided that margin because it carried big in Washington.
7,000 votes.
Oh yeah, it was big in Washington County. And so, of course, we always take credit for it.
Well, you should.
We don't deserve it.
You should. You should.
The politics is much about the myth of power.
Well, in that case, it's probably a valid claim on your part. Let me ask you this. Did George Romney appoint you to any state office or offices, or was that only Governor Bill Milliken?
Yes, Milliken appointed me to the Highway Commission.
Right.
He then appointed me to the board at Michigan State University. Right. Then James Blanchard is the one who appointed me to the State Officers Compensation Commission.
Right.
And John Engler, much to my chagrin, appointed me to the Michigan Judicial Tenure Commission, the worst 2 years of my life.
Well, we'll get to all those.
Oh, yes.
Let me ask you just one question about George Romney. Wasn't there some incident involving a bar mitzvah?
Yes,
a mental facility? What happened?
Here's what happened. George Romney was very good at doing 4th of July parades. He would get on a helicopter and hop around to about 5 or 6 different 4th of July parades, with Ypsilanti being the final one at 11 o'clock in the morning. He'd start out at 9 o'clock and downriver someplace and so on. But this one year, when we got to Ypsilanti, everything was all set, and we were going to have lunch at my dad's farms right west of town as soon as we was through with the parade. Well, as soon as we finished the parade, the state trooper pulled me aside. He said, "Peter, the governor wants to go out to the Ypsilanti State Hospital," which was right south of my dad's farm, about 4 or 5 miles. And I said, "Well, that's fine, whatever he wishes to do." But he says, "We've got to be very careful with security because there can be some hazards there. Would you be willing to go with us?" I said, "Of course." And so we went out, and it turned out that the reason the governor was going there is because some Jewish family that knew Romney through some connection, I think it was way back in American Motors days, their grandson was at an age, he was in the youth psychiatric unit there, so he could not leave the facility. So they were going to conduct his bar mitzvah there. And they asked the governor if he would be willing to participate, which he did readily. So we went out there, the bar mitzvah was all set, the governor walks in, and it was a most remarkable thing. Here was the governor of the state of Michigan participating in a Jewish bar mitzvah. He was, of course, very active in the Mormon church. Everybody knew that. But the governor gave a very, very compelling presentation on the bonds of similarity between Judaism, Christianity, the Mormon faith, all of it. It was very moving.
Wow.
The family was very touched, and it was. But nobody knew about it. One of the requirements was no press, nothing. And so I believe I'm one of the few people that was actually an eyewitness there who can still tell that story, and it's absolutely valid.
That is amazing. That is an amazing story. We'll get back to George Romney in a minute. Let me ask you, you get Governor Bill Milliken elected to a full 4-year term in 1970, and so he rewards you by appointing you to some state agency?
I would characterize it more as a punishment because I had made it crystal clear. Well, I had made it crystal clear I didn't want to occupy any public office.
Yeah.
But the State Highway Department and Commission had been through a terrible grand jury. Lots of problems. And Governor Milliken, for some reason, thought I was a rather radamanthine character. And he said, "I've got to get somebody in there who's going to not want to take bribes, not want to twist the rules, not want to cheat on anything."
And maybe ask some hard questions.
Right, and demand answers. And there were good aspects of the Highway Department, but they were so discouraged because of all the problems they'd been through. And so he appointed me to the State Highway Commission.
Now, was this about what, 72?
Yes, 1972.
72, okay.
And of course the Democrats were incensed. Oh yes, this was a payoff, and therefore they were going to block my confirmation. Well, as you recall, the Constitution required that they had to act in 60 session days. But there was an even split in the Michigan Senate.
Yeah.
It was split. So the Republicans just held back. They didn't move up so 60 days went by, and I was by default confirmed. So I loved going around the state telling people not a single vote was cast against my confirmation. And of course, not a single vote was cast for me.
Well, that's right. We don't mention the latter.
No, of course not. But I was a full-fledged commissioner.
So what did you find when you became a member of that body?
I found that the department was very severely scarred by that whole experience and eager to get back on the right track. And fortunately, when I arrived, it was almost coincidental with the hiring of John Woodford as the director. And John Woodford was an excellent, absolutely excellent director. It was one of my proudest accomplishments was seeing that John was the director, and I supported him completely, and he supported us. And John often said afterwards, he said, "Fletcher was a tough boss, but he was absolutely straight arrow. There was no, and he would really get after us. He'd put the pressure on us. But when he went over to the legislature to testify, when he spoke at public meetings about the highway department, he was a big proponent. He explained to people why we had to become a transportation department, not a highway department. So we had to be interested in public transportation. We had to be interested in all the forms of transportation, whether it was aircraft, whether it was boats, everything. And John and I thought we made a pretty good team.